Hello, I'm Corey and welcome to another episode of Flips, Flaps, and Folds. Today we're going to be making a double fold pocket, or tuck I should say. It's a pocket tuck flip. It's a little bit of everything. And it's going to end up with 1, 2, 3, 4 pockets or tucks, as well as an optional little flip space to do some additional journaling if you choose. I covered this one, though I didn't decorate all the pages. And again, I do it because whatever your decorating style, these base pieces will work. So if you like a more nature theme or a more grungy theme, or if you like more Victorian or floral, whatever you like, whatever your preference is, you can take these bases and make them work for you. Okay, and the way we're going to do this is using something you probably already have on hand. This is just a page of a book insert, a journal insert. Many times when I go to the thrift store, I'll get these journals that people have used or started, and then they've never finished. There's a whole bunch of blank pages inside, and maybe you can see all these little bound signatures. Well, when you take that spine off and pull them apart, you can often get a double page spread or 2 pages in one with the seam in the middle. And that's true with blank journals and old books as well. On this old book, it was a 1920s book, you can see they don't have that same type of a seam. So when I tear them out, I get single pages. I don't have the option to do the top double pages. Maybe if I were super careful, but I haven't been able to do it yet. But on the old books that have, these really cool old sewn signatures like we do, I find it a lot easier to take the pages out without ripping them. I mean, ripped pages, there's a ton we can do with, but these intact pages also offer us a lot of options, and this is one way to use them. So the sample that we're making today, I'm using a solid page just because it's easier to see, but you can do the same thing with these book pages. It's just a little bit smaller. You've got the pocket here, you've got a pocket here with an optional flip. I didn't put the bottom piece on this flip, but you certainly could. And then a tuck spot here, and then once this is glued down, you've got a spot in the back. So it works well with that. The only drawback to that is your pockets. When you flip up this piece, your print will be upside down, but that's easy enough to cover and fold if that bothers you. So it works great with book page, and it also works really well with plain copy paper. You won't have those cool holes, but you'll still get the same exact idea. All right, and the way we make this is really pretty simple. You've got your center signature already folded if you're pulling from a book or from an old notebook, okay? And then this is going to be my center. So I fold this in half. My first step is just to fold it where that natural seam is. Oh, and you can see here, I didn't do it, well, maybe you can't see. But anyway, I didn't fold it straight, but that's an easy fix with this type of paper because it's so thin. It is easy to recrease. So I'm going to come in and fold it, and then I'll just press it with it's thinner paper, so it presses fine without a bone folder. And then I'm going to take, so if I've got this as a regular book like I'm opening it, I'm going to take the top page and fold it back to my center crease where I tore it out of the book, where my spine is. And I'm going to crease that back. And so I've got my first fold. I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing. So I want both my front and my back to fold down into the center. And when you're done, it's going to look like an M, sort of like an M. So you'll have mountain, valley, mountain. That's another way to say it. So it'll look just like this. So if you want your finished project to open to the left, like a standard book, then you're going to want your center to the right. If you want to open it the opposite way, your center will be to the left and your book will open to the right. So whichever your need is for your book, for your journal, you can make this work. I'm going to work this way simply because I think that way. So I've got it folded. And my next step is to decide how deep I want my pockets. So if I were wanting a shorter a shorter piece because I'm working in a smaller book, I would just make my pocket a little bit deeper. I would fold it up a little bit more. If I'm working in a tall book, I'm going to make my pocket a little more shallow. So here, I'm going to choose 2.5 simply because that's right in front of me. And I'm going to give it one score. It's all 4 pieces are folded on itself, and I scored it once. Then what I'll do is I'll open it up. Again, because I'm wanting to open it this to the left, my center is to the right, and I lay it out like this, and I'll call this panel 1, 2, 3, and 4. So on panel number 1, I have got my fold, and then I've got my score line. I'm going to cut just to the right of the fold, about 1/4 of an inch or so, just to the score line, and then I'll stop. And then I'm going to take and cut in just to my fold line. I'm not going to cut past it, just to my fold line. And I'll show you in a bit why we do this. And it just gives it, you're going to eventually fold it over. It just gives you a little bit of space when you glue it down. It increases your landscape basically, or your pocket space. And then what I generally tend to do is I'll just come in and take a little triangle off, simply because this folds a little nicer and lays a little flatter in my book. Okay. And then I'm going to come in to so panel number 1 has been cut at the bottom just to the score line. And you can see here, maybe you can see here, I didn't cut it straight, but we can fix that afterwards, so it's not a big deal. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to do the same thing, but instead of going to the right of my fold line, I'm going to come just to the left, and I'm going to do the same dimension. I'm going to go to the left of the fold line about 1/4 of an inch. It doesn't have to be exact, and you don't have to measure. And I'm going to stop at the score line. So I'm going to cut from the bottom to the score line about 1/4 of an inch to the left of my fold line. And I'm going to come in and do the same thing. And I'm going to cut on the score line just to the fold line. And I'm going to take the little triangles out. And they don't have to be big, and you don't even have to do that if you don't want to. I just find it glues a little better. All right, so this is what it's going to look like when you've made your cuts. You're going to have a center section with, I don't know, little gaps on either side, and you're going to have 2 folds. And I'm going to turn this first fold into a pocket, well, or maybe a tuck. Well, I'm going to make this one a pocket. And so I'm just going to use a little bit of wet glue. With the wet glue and thin paper, if you use a small amount, I find it doesn't seep through. If you use any significant amount at all, you're going to see the glue through the other side. So you can certainly use your glue stick for this if you choose, or you can use dry line adhesive, but dry line adhesive doesn't give you any wiggle room, so I caution you against that. I should have stated first, if I were for the sample, it's not a big deal, but if I were going to ink the edges, which I do 90% of the time, I would ink it before I glued it down, just because it's a lot easier. And I'm not going to ink on screen because you don't need to see that. Everybody knows how to ink. And then I just glue this first piece down. Okay, I didn't put quite enough glue on there. All right, first piece glued down. Then I'm going to come to this second piece, and I don't want this one to be a pocket, though I could certainly make it a pocket. I'm going to have this one be a tuck spot. So I'm just going to cut a straight line wherever I want. It doesn't really matter, unless I have a specific piece I want to put in there, and that would of course change it. And so I'm going to cut from the bottom to the score line, and then I'm going to cut across the score line just to my first cut, just like that. And I think a tuck spot looks more like a tuck spot when it's rounded, so I'll come in and round this corner. Okay, and then again, if I were going to ink it, I would ink it now before I glue it down. I'd ink the side and the top, and maybe even this side too. And I'll use just a little bit of wet glue, but this time, because I'm making it a tuck, I'm only going to use it on the flap that I just created. And again, you can cut this straight down. You don't have to have a flap. I just find it easier to access the tuck, and it gives me just a little bit more playing space when I've got that flap in there. All right, so now you have created a pocket and you've created a tuck, and you can see here I didn't put nearly enough glue on. I was trying to go light so you can see what I mean. I just need to pull a little bit more. But if I'm going to cover the front, it won't show through either way. So you can see here the glue doesn't show through because I didn't go too heavy, and the same thing on the back. All right, now I've got this. What I'm going to do now is, see where I said earlier when I didn't cut it perfectly? Well, this my pocket's folded and my tuck is folded. So now I just come in and cut a straight line. If you don't like using scissors, I use little scissors most of the time, but I find that little scissors for long cuts just makes it easier to not cut it straight. You can also use your trimmer for this if you've got one of those Fiskars type trimmers that allows you to start and stop. And that's it. There's my base. And then what I will do is I'm going to save this piece, and I didn't cut that perfectly straight, so I would probably use a trimmer and cut this straight. And I'll put this aside in case we're going to use it a little bit later, or in case you want to use it a little bit later. Here's something I often do. So I'm going to take a divot at the top because that's where I want my pocket. If I wanted my pocket on this side, I could absolutely make my pocket on this side. But when I'm taking a divot with thinner paper like this, I find that sometimes my punch doesn't cut. So I'll grab a piece of scrap paper and just place it on the top, and then use purple tape, which is a non-tacky tape, or super tacky, it doesn't tear the page. And then that just gives me enough of a purchase to make, I should try to center that, shouldn't I? To take my divot without tearing the paper. And so then I've got my pocket divot at top. You know what, that's a really crummy divot. It's, you know, this is just a sample. Take your divot as deep or as wide as you want, and I'd probably use a larger punch than this one for this particular piece. So I've got my divot there, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I am going to put this down, and because I'm making a little tuck spot back here, I am going to take a divot. And again, this is just a single page as a sample, so I'm not going to measure it perfectly or make sure it's absolutely centered. Okay, and then you can reuse this stuff too because of the nature of it. You're just kind of holding it in place. I use this a lot when I'm sewing in signatures. So I'll save that little piece, and here you go. Now, all I would do is glue the place where I'm going to make my center pocket. So I would glue along this inside seam and along the bottom. But if I were wanting to make my little flap like I did on the other one, I put that on first. So I would lightly glue this down before I glue the bottom and the side closed to make my pocket. So here, I'll just put a little bit of glue in there just to hold it in place. And then I'm going to glue my pocket closed. And so when you glue your pocket closed, one way to check yourself is you want the point of your W facing forward. And I'll put just a little bit of glue along the bottom and along the side. And push those together. And I'm just going to make sure it's straight. And there is our flip, flap, and fold. Where is this? There we go. You've got a pocket in the front, then you've got a pocket at the top. You flip your page over, you've got a little flip here. Now, what I did on the other one, before I glued this down, I just used another scrap of the same paper and did the same thing. Tucked it in and had it meet in the middle. Where's the one I did here? The one I did here. Oh, here we go. So you can see the one I did here, I did the same thing. I just tucked a scrap of paper in, and I used these super little thin Velcro dots. Velcro dots have different thicknesses. These are super thin, so they really don't show very much. I think I got them at Walmart, but anyway, to hold that flap closed for hidden journaling space. And then when you glue it down on the back of your page, you've got a pocket here, and then you've got a side tuck spot here. And that is today's flip, flap, and fold. And I'm gonna, one more mention. A lot of times I don't decorate these when I'm making them, simply because that's not the point of this video, but sometimes I'll come back later. Like this double tuck, I didn't really love it when I first made it, but the other day I thought, you know what, I'm gonna put a few things on there, and I started playing, and I actually really like it now. It's probably one of my favorites, just because I came in later on and added a couple little bits. So if you want just a basic idea book with undecorated, that's awesome. But if it makes you not happy to have it undecorated, come back in at a later time and decorate. Thanks for watching, and I hope that gave you some ideas.